My cousin uploaded my baby's pictures online, dubbing herself Mama, letting others laud her little miracle's very first appearance. Upon my request to remove it, she chuckled, saying, "You're so dramatic." Clearly, folks understand I'm not his mother. I remained quiet. That happened 4 months past. This morning, she was led off in cuffs, yelling things the news had to censor. You guys, can you imagine having to fight to prove you're your own child's mother? Because that's the nightmare I lived through, all thanks to my cousin. What the hell happened next? Let me tell you, it nearly destroyed my family. Honestly, my cousin Lena has always been the most attention-hungry person I've ever known. Ever since I can remember, she had to be first, she had to be the best, and she had to be the most noticed. She's 2 years older than me, and growing up, it was a constant battle. If I got a new toy, poof, it was suddenly hers, and she'd run to the adults, telling them I was lying to get her in trouble. And you know what? She could fake tears on command, so they almost always believed her. It drove me insane. At birthday parties, she'd open other kids' presents and pose for pictures, holding them like they were for her. At family dinners, if someone dared to compliment my dress, she'd snap, "Oh, she only looks nice because I helped her pick it." A total lie, of course. As we got older, her tactics got sneakier, but her self-centered attitude never changed. If I posted something good online, like my graduation photo, she'd immediately post her own picture the same day, with some vague caption like, "So proud of myself for everything I've accomplished," just to make sure everyone's attention shifted right back to her. When I got engaged, she started telling everyone that she had helped my husband pick out my ring, that he came to her for advice. It was a complete fabrication. She even made a Facebook post congratulating me, but she had to add, "I basically set them up," as if she was our matchmaker. I just rolled my eyes back then, thinking, classic Lena. Then came my pregnancy. Oh, you guys, from the moment she found out, she tried to make it all about her. I announced it at a family barbecue, and everyone hugged me, except Lena. She just smirked and said, "You'd better not name him something stupid." A few weeks later, I found out she was telling people we're pregnant and I'm going to be like a second mom. At first, I tried to brush it off. Lena was always dramatic, always seeking attention. I figured this was just another one of her phases. But then my son, Ethan, was born and things went from annoying to just creepy. I posted a single, sweet photo of him the day after he was born, just a close-up of his tiny face. Within hours, Lena had taken that photo, cropped out my watermark, and posted it on her page with a caption that made my blood run cold. "Finally got to meet my little man. Mama loves you so much." Mama. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. The comments section exploded. People were congratulating her, some even saying, "I didn't know you were pregnant." And she didn't correct them. Not once. She just replied with heart emojis, "We're so happy," or "It was a long road, but worth it." My hands were shaking as I called her immediately, demanding she take it down. She just laughed. "You're being so dramatic," she chirped. "Obviously, people know I'm not his mom. I'm just being affectionate." But she refused to remove it. Over the next few weeks, she kept posting more stolen photos. Some were from my private messages to family. Others she even got from my own mom. She'd caption them with things like, "Mama and baby cuddles. He's my whole world." Or, "First bath, so proud." And every single time, people commented as if Ethan was her baby, and she just let them believe it. The absolute worst was when she posted a hospital picture of her holding Ethan, right after I gave birth, with the caption, "Finally got to meet my little miracle." The comments section was flooded, "Congrats, Lena. You'll be such a great mom." And her reply? "Thank you. We're doing well." That was it. I'd had enough. If she wanted attention, I decided I was going to give her more than she could handle. I gathered screenshots of all her posts, side by side with my originals, clearly showing I posted them first. I blurred my baby's face for privacy, but Lena's face was crystal clear. Then I made a very public Facebook post. I wrote, just to clear up some confusion, "This beautiful little boy is my son, not anyone else's." I carried him for 9 months, went through 18 hours of labor, and his father is my husband. If you've been congratulating someone else, you've been misled. Please stop feeding into lies. Proud actual mom here. And attached all the side-by-side screenshots, with her captions claiming motherhood right next to my original posts. It exploded. Mutual friends were utterly shocked, commenting things like, "Wait, I thought Lena had a baby? This is so creepy." People tagged her, demanding to know why she lied. A few even apologized to me, admitting they genuinely thought she was the mother. Lena called me within the hour, absolutely screaming, "You humiliated me. You made me look crazy." I just told her, "You didn't need my help for that." She tried to spin it, saying she never meant to mislead anyone, that she was just showing love. Classic gaslighting. I reminded her, for weeks, she let people believe my child was hers. She never corrected them. She even wrote captions in the first person. "That's not affection, Lena. That's lying." She huffed, accused me of ruining her reputation, and hung up. Since then, she's deleted most of the posts and gone quiet on social media. But she still hasn't admitted she was wrong. Some relatives think I went too far by making it public, but others? They're fully on my side. And honestly, if someone tries to claim your child, they deserve to be exposed. The best part? Every time Lena tries to post something vague and attention-seeking now, people comment, "Is this about your other baby?" But just when I thought she couldn't sink any lower, my phone lit up with a blocked number. And then, there was a knock at my door. A hard, official knock. I opened it to find a woman in her 40s holding an official folder with the state seal on it. She showed me her badge. "I'm Ms. Torres from Child Protective Services," she said. My hands started shaking. She explained they'd gotten a report about possible child neglect and substance abuse at my address. The words hit me like a physical blow. Someone had called CPS on me. Just 3 days after I'd exposed Lena online. Jake came up behind me, and I felt him freeze solid when he heard what she was saying. Ms. Torres asked if she could come in to inspect the home and see the baby, explaining this was standard protocol. I nodded numbly, stepping aside, my mind racing. Lena had escalated this way beyond social media drama. Jake, quick thinking as always, pulled out his phone and started recording quietly from a corner while Ms. Torres walked through our living room, scrutinizing everything. She headed straight for Ethan's nursery, checking the crib for safety hazards, running her hand along the rails, checking the mattress firmness. I grabbed my phone, texting my mom, "Do you know anything about someone calling CPS?" While the investigator took photos of the clean, organized room. Ms. Torres opened drawers, checking our supply of diapers, wipes, and clothes, making notes on her tablet. She moved to the kitchen next, inspecting our formula supplies and bottle sterilization setup. Jake squeezed my hand, whispering, "We have nothing to hide," but I was fighting back tears, watching this stranger judge my parenting, my life. She noticed the feeding schedule I'd posted on the fridge and even took a photo of it. Ms. Torres pulled out a checklist and started asking detailed questions about Ethan's pediatrician visits and vaccination records. I went to the hallway closet and grabbed his baby book, where I'd kept everything meticulously organized, my marketing background showing in the color-coded tabs and detailed documentation. She flipped through the pages, looking impressed, but kept her professional distance, making more notes. My phone rang. It was my mom, calling back, horrified when I told her about CPS. She swore she had nothing to do with it, but then mentioned that Diane, Lena's mom, had called her earlier, crying about how I was attacking Lena online. I put her on speaker so Jake could hear my mom's conflicted tone, trying to stay neutral between her daughter and her sister. Ms. Torres asked to see Ethan, who was napping upstairs. We went up, and she gently lifted him, checking his weight, looking for any signs of abuse or neglect while my fists were clenched at my sides. She examined his arms and legs, checked his reflexes, and noted that he was clean, well-fed, and responsive. Then she turned to me and asked about my mental health history, whether I was taking any medications. I showed her my clean medical records from my recent OB/GYN visit, admitting to normal postpartum anxiety, but nothing requiring medication. Jake added that I'd been an amazing mother despite all the stress from family drama. Ms. Torres typed more notes, and I just stared at Ethan's photos on the wall, remembering those posts where Lena called herself Mama. Our house felt different now, violated, invaded. I wondered if this was just the beginning. Finally, Ms. Torres asked about family dynamics and any conflicts that might affect Ethan's welfare. I hesitated for a second then. I explained everything. The whole situation with Lena stealing photos, claiming to be Ethan's mother online. The investigator's eyebrows went up slightly as she took detailed notes. Jake grabbed his phone and pulled up my Facebook post with all the screenshots I'd used to expose Lena's lies. He turned the screen toward Ms. Torres, scrolling through each image while she leaned forward, studying them carefully. Her pen moved quickly as she examined the side-by-side comparisons of Lena's posts next to my original photos. She asked why someone would claim another person's child as their own. I found myself explaining Lena's entire history of attention-seeking, going all the way back to our childhood, the stolen toys, the fake tears, the constant need to be the center of everything, and how it had only gotten worse. Ms. Torres nodded, kept writing, then set down her pen and looked at both of us with a serious expression. She said the anonymous report had claimed I was mentally unstable, aggressive toward family members, had threatened people, and was using drugs. My jaw literally dropped open. These were complete, utter lies. Total fabrications that had nothing to do with reality. Jake immediately jumped in, his voice rising. Can we file charges for making a false CPS report? Ms. Torres held up her hand, explaining she needed to follow protocol regardless of what she personally thought. She asked for contact information for Ethan's pediatrician and my doctor to verify medical records. Her tone was professional, but she added that this was standard procedure and didn't mean she believed any of the allegations against us. My hands shook as I wrote down all the numbers. She took the information and moved to our living room to make the calls while we waited in the kitchen. I picked up Ethan, started feeding him his bottle, trying to keep things normal even though my heart was racing. Jake paced back and forth, laptop open, researching CPS procedures and false report laws, bookmarking page after page of legal statutes. He showed me one site that said filing a false CPS report could lead to criminal charges and even jail time in Ohio. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Aunt Diane was defending Lena on Facebook, claiming I had humiliated her publicly and started this whole war. The message said Diane was telling everyone I was cruel for exposing Lena's innocent mistake, that family should handle things privately. It hit me then. My aunt had completely chosen sides. The family divide that started with stolen baby photos was rapidly becoming a massive chasm. Ms. Torres came back into the kitchen about 20 minutes later, her paperwork organized in a folder. She said she'd scheduled a follow-up visit for next week, but saw no immediate danger to Ethan. The case would remain open for at least 30 days while they completed their investigation, standard procedure. She handed us a thick packet explaining the process, our rights, and what to expect. As she gathered her things, heading toward the door, she paused. Quietly, she mentioned that filing false reports was a serious crime in Ohio. Her eyes met mine with a knowing look that made it clear she suspected exactly who had made that anonymous call. She suggested we document everything related to this situation, keep detailed records of any harassment or false allegations. After the door clicked shut, I completely fell apart. I collapsed onto the couch with Ethan pressed against my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Jake wrapped his arms around both of us, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching, his whole body rigid with anger. Our home felt violated, contaminated by this investigation. Our parenting questioned by a stranger, all because of Lena's escalating lies and manipulation. Jake pulled out his phone and called his brother, who worked as a paralegal. He explained the whole situation, pacing around the living room, asking about lawyer recommendations and legal options for dealing with harassment. His brother said this could definitely qualify for a restraining order, especially with the false CPS report added to the pattern of harassment. He promised to email us contact information for several attorneys specializing in family law by the next morning. That evening, I scrolled through my phone, seeing dozens of messages from mutual friends asking about the drama. Some people had already unfriended me, clearly choosing Lena's side without even asking for my version of events. Others sent supportive messages, shocked by Lena's behavior. The social media battlefield where this all started was now causing real casualties in my actual life and relationships. Later that night, Jake found me at the kitchen table, laptop open, papers spread everywhere, looking like a crime board from a detective show. I was typing up every single thing Lena had done since we were kids, listing dates and incidents with screenshots and naming witnesses. Jake pulled up a chair and said, "We need documentation for whatever comes next, legal or otherwise." The timeline grew to 12 pages by morning. Each incident worse than the last, showing a clear pattern of escalation that made my stomach turn. Mom showed up the next afternoon with groceries and dark circles under her eyes. She set everything on the counter and told me Diane had been calling her nonstop, screaming about how I was destroying the family and turning everyone against poor Lena. Mom's hands shook as she unpacked the milk, admitting Diane claimed Lena was having some kind of breakdown, and it was all my fault for publicly humiliating her. While organizing all the evidence into folders later that day, I found old Facebook messages from Lena I'd forgotten about, sent during my pregnancy asking super specific questions. My exact due date, which hospital, who my doctor was, what kind of birth I was planning, even asking for ultrasound photos. At the time, I thought she was just being supportive. But now, I realized she'd been gathering information to make her lies more believable. The doorbell rang hard and fast the next morning. Jake was working, I was feeding Ethan. And there stood Diane, looking absolutely furious. She pushed past me into my living room before I could stop her, yelling that I was a bully who'd put Lena in the hospital for emotional distress. Jake came running from his office and stepped between us, his voice deadly calm, telling her to leave immediately or he'd call the police. Diane's face turned red as she insisted Lena just loved babies, meant no harm, that I'd blown innocent affection completely out of proportion. She pointed her finger at me, screaming, "You haven't seen the last of this. Lena has rights as family to see Ethan whenever she wants." Jake grabbed his phone, starting to dial 911, which made Diane back toward the door, still yelling that family should forgive family. He slammed the door so hard the pictures on the wall shook, then immediately started looking up lawyers while I tried to stop my hands from trembling. 3 days later, we sat in the office of Michelle Crawford, a family law attorney. Our massive folder of evidence spread across her desk. She flipped through everything slowly, her eyebrows rising higher with each page, making notes. Michelle looked up and told us this wasn't just harassment, but also identity theft, fraud, and filing a false CPS report, all serious crimes. She agreed to take our case immediately and explained we needed to file for an emergency protective order against both Lena and Diane. The false CPS report would strengthen our case significantly, but she warned the legal process could take weeks, during which Lena might escalate further. While Jake stayed to discuss strategy and fees, my phone buzzed with a text from my boss asking when I planned to return from maternity leave. I stared at the message, realizing there was no way I could go back to work with all this happening. I'd need to extend my leave to deal with this nightmare. That night, I couldn't sleep at all, checking the baby monitor every few minutes, jumping at every car that drove past our house. Jake spent hours installing new security cameras on every corner of the house and changing all our locks, even adding a chain lock to the front door. Every shadow outside made my heart race, wondering if Lena or Diane might show up again. Our home had become a fortress against my own family. Mom called the next morning, sounding upset, saying Lena had posted something vague on Facebook about missing her baby and how some mothers didn't deserve their gifts. The comments were already filling up with sympathy from people who didn't know the real story, telling her to stay strong. I took screenshots for Michelle, watching more people fall for Lena's victim act, some even attacking me in the comments without knowing any facts. A week later, Ms. Torres knocked on our door at exactly 9 a.m., clipboard in hand, same professional smile. I'd spent the entire week keeping the house spotless, documenting every feeding and diaper change, taking pictures of Ethan during tummy time just in case. She walked through each room again, checking locks on cleaning supplies, testing smoke detectors, and watching me prepare a bottle while Ethan gurgled happily. She mentioned she'd called our pediatrician, Dr. Chin, who told her Ethan was hitting all his milestones and that I never missed an appointment. Ms. Torres sat down at our kitchen table and asked if there had been any new incidents. I pulled out the timeline I'd been keeping, every Facebook post, every text message, and the lawyer's business card Michelle had given us. She nodded while reading through everything, making notes about the pattern of behavior, mentioning this might help the case close sooner than expected. Right as she was saying how well we were handling everything, my phone buzzed with an email notification from my company's HR department. The subject line made my stomach drop. Urgent meeting required regarding online conduct complaint. Jake was standing behind me making coffee when he saw my face go white and came over to read the email. The message said they'd received an anonymous complaint about my social media activity, bringing negative attention to the company and damaging their reputation. HR getting involved over social media drama? That's like bringing a spreadsheet to a family fight. Technically correct, but completely missing the point of whose baby photos started this whole mess. My hands started shaking as I showed Ms. Torres the email, explaining that I'd been on maternity leave for 3 months and hadn't posted anything work-related. She immediately started writing faster, asking for a copy of the email, saying, "This kind of retaliation actually strengthens your harassment case against Lena." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore, telling her how Lena was attacking me from every angle, trying to take my baby, my reputation, and now my job. Ms. Torres put down her pen and looked me straight in the eye, promising she'd provide a written statement about the false CPS report to my lawyer. Jake was already on the phone with Michelle, pacing back and forth, explaining the HR situation. I could hear Michelle's voice through the speaker, telling him to document everything, contact HR directly, and that this showed a clear pattern of harassment. She said we could add this to our case, showing how Lena was intentionally trying to destroy my life piece by piece. The next morning, I drove to my office for the first time since maternity leave. My evidence folder was thick with screenshots and legal documents. Tom Bradley, the HR director, met me in his corner office, his expression serious. He showed me the complaint they'd received. Someone had sent screenshots of my Facebook post exposing Lena, but they'd carefully cropped out all of Lena's original posts, claiming to be Ethan's mother. Tom flipped through my evidence folder, his eyebrows raising higher with each page, especially when he saw the CPS report and lawyer's letterhead. He spent 20 minutes reading everything, then looked up and told me my job was safe. But he needed to investigate whether this complaint constituted workplace harassment. He suggested I work from home for now, just until they figured out who sent the complaint and whether it was connected to my cousin. I sat in my car afterward, completely drained, feeling like I was fighting a war on every front with no end in sight. I texted Jake that I was okay, but needed to stop at my mom's house, needing to see a friendly face. Mom's kitchen looked like a bakery had exploded, cookies cooling on every surface, 3 loaves of bread rising. She was stress baking again, something she'd done since Dad died, her way of dealing with things she couldn't control. She hugged me tight, then admitted Diane had been calling her nonstop, demanding she make me apologize to Lena for humiliating her publicly. Diane was threatening to cut Mom off from that entire side of the family if she didn't convince me to take down my posts and apologize. Mom's voice cracked as she told me what else Diane had said, that Lena was telling everyone she was looking into adoption agencies. According to Diane, Lena couldn't have children naturally, which was a complete lie. She'd never even tried or been tested. The story Lena was spreading was that I had stolen her chance at motherhood by forbidding her from seeing Ethan, her nephew she loved like a son. Extended family members were starting to take sides, with some cousins calling Mom to ask if it was true that I was keeping Lena from her practically adopted baby. 2 days later, Jake and I walked into the Columbus police station with a folder full of screenshots, printouts, and the CPS report Ms. Torres had given us. The desk officer directed us to Detective Brian Walsh, a guy in his 40s who looked like he'd seen it all, but still seemed interested. We sat in his small office while he flipped through our evidence, his eyebrows raising higher with each page. He took notes as we explained everything, from the stolen baby photos to the false CPS report to Jake's boss getting calls about us being unfit parents. Detective Walsh leaned back in his chair and told us that making false CPS reports was a misdemeanor in Ohio. But with everything else Lena had done, we might be looking at harassment charges too. He said he'd need to interview Lena and track down who made those anonymous calls, which could take weeks. As we were leaving the station, we ran right into Diane in the parking lot, and she had this smug look on her face like she'd just won something. She told us she was there to file her own complaint about us harassing her poor daughter, and that Lena had documented everything we'd done to hurt her. Jake pulled out his phone and started recording while he calmly told Diane that filing false police reports was also a crime. She got flustered and said she was just protecting her daughter, basically admitting on camera that she was involved in all this mess. Back home that evening, I checked my messages and found several cousins had reached out with support, saying they'd always known Lena was crazy. They started sharing stories I'd never heard before, how she'd stolen one cousin's boyfriend in college by lying about being pregnant, how she'd copied another cousin's entire thesis and tried to submit it as her own, and how she'd faked having cancer in high school to get out of taking finals. A week later, Michelle called with huge news. She'd managed to get records showing the CPS report came from a phone registered to Diane's address, which proved family members had made the false report. Michelle suggested I make a careful Facebook post about pursuing legal action, just to let everyone know we weren't backing down. Within hours of my post going up, Lena fired back with her own dramatic post claiming she was the real victim. She'd posted old family photos from Christmas and birthdays, but she'd cropped them to cut me out completely, making it look like she'd always been the center of the family while I didn't exist. She wrote this long thing about how heartbroken she was to be kept from her nephew. Some distant relatives actually believed her, commenting with hearts and support. Then I got messages from two of my high school friends asking if I was okay because Lena had been messaging them with old photos from sophomore year, making up stories about how I'd bullied her and stolen her clothes and spread rumors. They forwarded me the messages, and it was clear Lena was losing it. Sending paragraph after paragraph about things that never happened, twisting every memory to make herself the victim. That night, around 3 a.m, Jake found me sitting in Ethan's nursery, just watching him sleep, crying my eyes out. I told Jake I was scared this would never end, that Lena would keep doing this forever, and our son would grow up with this crazy woman trying to claim him. Jake held me tight and promised we'd do whatever it took to protect our baby, even if it meant moving away or getting restraining orders or whatever else we needed to do. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the courthouse waiting room, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the folder of evidence Michelle had put together. Jake sat next to me, going through his phone one more time to make sure all the screenshots were saved, while Michelle reviewed her notes. The bailiff called us in, and I walked into that courtroom feeling like I might throw up from nerves. Lena wasn't even there, which made me mad because she'd caused all this mess and couldn't even show up to face it. But Diane was sitting in the back row, giving me the nastiest look I'd ever seen from her. I took the stand and started going through everything from the beginning, with Michelle asking me questions about each piece of evidence. I showed the judge the original photos I'd posted versus Lena's stolen versions where she called herself Mama. I explained about the CPS visit and how Ms. Torres had told me someone claimed I was using drugs. I talked about the HR complaint at my job that almost got me fired during maternity leave. The whole time, Diane kept making these huffing sounds and shaking her head like I was lying about everything. Michelle then took over and laid out all the evidence in this super organized way that made it impossible to deny what Lena had done. She showed the judge printouts from mom groups where Lena was asking for advice about custody battles when she had no kid of her own. She presented the timeline showing how Lena's posts claiming to be Ethan's mother started right after I'd blocked her on social media. The judge kept asking questions about Lena's mental state and whether she'd ever sought help for what seemed like delusional behavior. Michelle explained that we'd tried to handle this privately first, but Lena had escalated to harassment and false reports to government agencies. The judge was looking through the evidence when suddenly Diane jumped up from her seat and started yelling that I was a liar and that Lena was more of a mother to Ethan than I'd ever be because she actually deserved him. Everyone in the courtroom just froze while Diane kept ranting about how I was keeping Lena from her rightful place in Ethan's life and how Lena had more love for him in her pinky finger than I had in my whole body. The judge banged her gavel, telling Diane to sit down or she'd be held in contempt, but Diane just grabbed her purse and stormed out, still yelling about how this was all a conspiracy against her daughter. The judge shook her head and said that outburst had just proved our point about the family's concerning behavior. After reviewing everything, she granted a temporary protective order against Lena for 30 days until we could have a full hearing. But she said she couldn't include Diane since most of the evidence was specifically about Lena's actions. Michelle warned me this was only a partial win, and we'd need to stay alert because Diane was still free to cause problems. Outside the courthouse, my mom was waiting with Ethan in his stroller, and she pulled me into this huge hug the second she saw me. Something felt off about Lena not showing up to court while her mom sits there making a scene for her. It made me wonder if there was some plan here, like maybe Lena knew Diane would blow up and make things worse. Mom kept saying how proud she was that I'd finally stood up to Lena and admitted she should have put a stop to this behavior years ago when we were kids. That evening, Jake's parents showed up from Indiana. His mom, Patricia, sat down at our kitchen table and pulled out her phone. "You won't believe what I found," she said. She'd been using a fake account to monitor Lena's activity in these private Facebook mom groups, and what she found made my skin crawl. Lena had been posting for weeks, asking for advice about getting her baby back from an unfit mother, and describing Ethan down to the birthmark on his shoulder that she could only know about from stalking my private Instagram. She'd created this whole fantasy where she was his real mother, and I'd somehow stolen him from her. And she was asking these random internet moms for legal advice about custody rights. Patricia showed us screenshot after screenshot where Lena described our son and his daily routines that matched exactly with what I'd been posting to my close friends. In one post, Lena even claimed she'd been breastfeeding him, which was completely insane since she'd never been alone with him for more than 5 minutes. The other moms in the group were giving her advice about documenting everything and finding a good custody lawyer, not knowing they were enabling someone's delusions. Just as we were processing all this, the detective called Jake's phone. He said they'd made a breakthrough in the case. They'd traced the fake email used for the HR complaint to a computer at the public library and pulled the security footage from that day. Clear as day, the video showed Diane sitting at the computer during the exact time the email was sent to my company. They now had proof that Diane and Lena had been working together to systematically try to destroy my life and take my baby. I sat there at my kitchen table, realizing this wasn't just my cousin being jealous or attention-seeking like when we were kids. She and her mom had actually sat down and planned out how to ruin my reputation and make me look like an unfit mother so they could somehow take Ethan. The same cousin who used to steal my toys and claim them as hers was now trying to steal my actual child and had recruited her mother to help her do it. Michelle sent another email that night with even more stuff she'd found while investigating Lena's online activity. Lena had joined multiple forums about grandparent rights and was researching custody laws in Ohio, trying to find some legal way to force access to Ethan. She'd been asking questions about how aunt cousins could petition for custody if they believed a child was in danger and whether mental health issues in a mother were grounds for removal. She'd even found some sketchy lawyers' website about alienated relatives and their rights to family relationships being protected by law. A month into all the legal stuff, I tried going back to work remotely but kept checking our security cameras every 10 minutes. My laptop screen would show spreadsheets while my phone displayed our front door camera feed. Jake noticed me jumping at every car that drove past and started taking over most of Ethan's feedings and diaper changes. He installed extra locks on all the windows and bought one of those doorbell cameras that alerts your phone when anyone comes near. The bags under his eyes got darker each week, but he kept saying we'd get through this together. Ms. Torres came by for her final visit and spent 2 hours going through our house, watching me feed Ethan and asking about our routines. She typed up an official letter right there at our kitchen table stating the original report was clearly false and appeared to be made out of spite. She handed me the paper and said, "This will help your lawyer build the case against Lena." That same afternoon, my mom called crying because Diane had shown up at her house, screaming about how she needed to make me drop the protective order. Mom said Diane's face was red and she kept pointing her finger at her chest, threatening to tell everyone about something that happened 30 years ago if Mom didn't help her. Mom told her to get off her property and called the police, but Diane left before they arrived. 2 days later, I was scrolling Facebook when I saw a post from Lena's friend saying she'd been admitted to the hospital for exhaustion and a mental health crisis. The comments were split between people sending prayers and others saying I'd pushed her too far by exposing her lies publicly. Jake found me staring at my phone and reminded me that Lena did this to herself when she tried to steal our baby's identity. 3 days after that, Detective Walsh called to say he was recommending criminal charges for both Lena and Diane, including filing false reports, harassment, and conspiracy. He explained the district attorney would review everything but warned us the process could take months or even a year. During our meeting at the police station, he showed us printouts from 12 fake Facebook and Instagram accounts Lena had created using different email addresses. The digital forensics team traced them all back to her laptop and phone through IP addresses and device fingerprints. She'd been using them to follow my private accounts, screenshot my posts, and spread rumors that I was an unfit mother to mutual friends. Walsh said this counted as cyberstalking, which carried more serious penalties than simple harassment. I asked if she might actually go to jail, and he shook his head, explaining first-time offenders usually get probation and mandatory counseling. The judge would probably issue permanent restraining orders for both Lena and Diane. Part of me felt disappointed that they might not face real consequences after everything they'd put us through. That night, Jake and I sat at the kitchen table after putting Ethan to bed and talked about whether we should just move to another city. His job was completely remote, and my company had offices in several states. We could start fresh somewhere. Lena couldn't find us. But then Jake said running away felt like letting her win, and we both knew he was right. We were too tired to keep talking and went to bed without deciding anything. The next morning, I got a call from the daycare where we'd enrolled Ethan for next month, and the director's voice was serious. Someone had called claiming to be Ethan's mother and tried to change the pickup authorization list to add herself and remove me. The director said something felt wrong about the call because the woman couldn't answer basic questions about Ethan's enrollment paperwork. She'd asked for the caller's name, and the woman hung up immediately. My hands were shaking as I hung up and immediately called Michelle, our lawyer, who said this was exactly what we needed to push for an emergency extension on the protective order. She started working on the paperwork right away, adding the daycare incident to a growing list of violations, and also mentioned she was preparing a civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress since our therapy bills were piling up. And I'd already missed 3 weeks of work dealing with all this. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following week, and when we walked into the courtroom, there was Lena, with her own lawyer, looking like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed. She kept staring at me with this empty look. And when the judge was reviewing papers, I saw her mouth the words, "He's mine." My stomach turned, and Jake grabbed my hand so tight it hurt. Her lawyer stood up and started talking about how Lena was suffering from mental illness and needed treatment, not punishment, claiming that my public humiliation on Facebook had triggered some kind of psychological break. Michelle shot back immediately that mental illness doesn't give anyone the right to stalk, harass, or endanger a child. And the judge nodded, reviewing all the evidence we'd submitted. After about 20 minutes of back and forth, the judge extended the protective order for a full year and ordered Lena to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Plus, she had to stay at least 500 feet away from our entire family and surrender any firearms she owned. When the judge said the part about firearms, Lena actually laughed out loud. This weird, hollow laugh that made everyone in the courtroom turn and stare at her. Her lawyer quickly grabbed her arm and whispered something, but she kept giggling quietly to herself even as we all filed out of the courtroom. Outside in the hallway, Diane was waiting for us and immediately started screaming that we destroyed her daughter and that this was all our fault for being so cruel. Jake pulled out his phone and started recording as she got right in our faces, spit flying as she yelled that she'd make our lives hell and we'd pay for this no matter what it took. 2 security guards rushed over and pulled her away, escorting her toward the exit while she kept screaming threats over her shoulder. We went straight to the police station and filed another report about Diane's threats, and the detective added it to our growing case file, mentioning that the DA was very interested now because the pattern of escalation and conspiracy between mother and daughter was becoming clear. He said charges would likely be filed soon, which should have made me feel better, but somehow just made everything feel more real and scary. In the car afterward, I completely lost it, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe while Jake pulled over on the side of the road and held me. I just kept saying, I just want our old life back, when we didn't have to look over our shoulders every second. He was crying, too, admitting he was scared and didn't know how to protect us from someone so unpredictable, but promised we'd get through this together somehow. Patricia, playing detective with fake Facebook accounts, while Lena's out there claiming she breastfed a baby she barely met. Someone give this woman a reality check, because her imagination is working overtime while her brain took a permanent vacation. We drove to my mom, Carol's, house to pick up Ethan and found her in the middle of installing a new security system because she'd been getting weird hang-up calls at all hours and felt like someone was watching her house. The installer was showing her how to use the panic button while she held Ethan, and she looked exhausted and scared, which made me realize this nightmare had spread to everyone we loved. That evening, Michelle called with news from Lena's psychiatric evaluation that had been expedited by the court. It turned out she'd been off her medication for bipolar disorder for at least 6 months, which explained why things had gotten so bad so fast. Michelle said this might affect her criminal sentencing if charges were filed, possibly getting her treatment instead of jail time. But it didn't excuse anything she'd done or make us any safer. Later that night, I was rocking Ethan to sleep in his nursery, singing, "You Are My Sunshine," while tears ran down my face, whispering apologies to him for bringing all this chaos and danger into his tiny, innocent life. Jake stood in the doorway, watching us, his own eyes red and puffy, looking completely helpless as our baby finally drifted off to sleep in my arms, unaware of the storm raging around him. 2 weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant checking of door locks before my phone rang with a blocked number that made my stomach drop. But this time it was the district attorney's office calling to tell me they were filing criminal charges against both Lena and Diane. The prosecutor rattled off the counts like items on a grocery list: false reporting to CPS, harassment, cyberstalking, conspiracy to commit fraud, and 3 more charges I couldn't even process. Jake squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. She said the trial would probably be in 6 to 8 months, and we'd need to testify, which made me want to throw up right there on the kitchen floor. The next morning, we drove downtown to the prosecutor's office, a gray building that smelled like old coffee and copy paper, where a woman named Ms. Chin laid out thick folders full of evidence they'd collected. She showed us printed screenshots of every fake post Lena made, transcripts of Diane's calls to CPS, even security footage from the hospital showing Lena trying to get into the maternity ward after we'd banned her. Ms. Chin explained that Lena's lawyer would probably argue mental illness to get her a lighter sentence. But Diane didn't have that excuse, and she was clearly thinking straight when she made those false reports. Within hours of the charges being filed, my phone exploded with texts from family members who'd finally gotten the news through the family gossip network that moves faster than CNN. My Aunt Linda called crying, apologizing for not believing me before, saying she had no idea things had gotten so bad. My cousin Marcus texted that he was cutting off all contact with Diane's side of the family and was on my side completely. But then came the angry messages from Diane's sisters, calling me a traitor who was destroying the family over petty jealousy, saying I'd regret sending my own blood to prison. The family group chat turned into a war zone before someone finally deleted it entirely. And just like that, decades of family bonds shattered into two enemy camps. Mom showed up at my door 3 days later with red eyes and shaking hands, sitting on my couch and admitting she'd started seeing a therapist to deal with the guilt of not protecting me from Lena when we were kids. She pulled out a business card for another therapist, sliding it across the coffee table and telling me we all needed help processing this trauma, that none of us could heal alone. I stared at that card for a long time, realizing she was right, that this whole mess had broken something inside all of us that needed professional help to fix. Everything stayed quiet for almost 3 weeks until a knock at the door made me freeze. And there stood my neighbor, holding an envelope addressed to me with no return address, saying some woman had asked her to deliver it. My hands shook as I opened it, finding Lena's handwriting sprawled across 3 pages of notebook paper, rambling about how Ethan was our baby and we were meant to be together as a family and she'd be with us soon. I called 911 immediately while Jake grabbed Ethan from his crib and took him to the back bedroom. Both of us knew this was a violation of the protective order that could finally get her locked up. Detective Walsh himself showed up within 20 minutes, wearing gloves as he carefully placed the letter in an evidence bag. His face grim as he read through Lena's delusional promises about coming home to our son. He sat at my kitchen table, pulling out his notebook and recommending we install more security cameras. Maybe even consider staying with family for a while until they could arrest her. Before he even made it back to the station, his partner was already at Diane's house with an arrest warrant for Lena, who apparently tried to run out the back door, but got tangled in the garden hose. The news that night showed Lena in handcuffs being led to a police car. Her hair a mess and her face twisted in rage as she screamed something the news had to bleep out. Diane posted her bail within 3 hours, but the judge wasn't playing around this time, ordering Lena to wear an ankle monitor and report to an inpatient psychiatric facility within 48 hours. I sat on the couch watching the news coverage on repeat, seeing my cousin who I'd grown up with being arrested because of her obsession with my baby. And despite everything she'd done, I remembered the little girl who used to braid my hair at sleepovers. Part of me felt sad for the person she used to be before jealousy and whatever mental illness she had turned her into this stranger who tried to steal my life. Jake's brother Tom came over the next week with a financial advisor who helped us set up an ironclad trust fund for Ethan with security measures that would make Fort Knox jealous. We spent 3 hours signing papers that made sure no family member could ever access his money. That required multiple signatures for any withdrawals that basically built a legal fortress around our son's future. Every document we signed felt like another brick in the wall protecting Ethan from anyone who might try to manipulate or use him like Lena had tried to do. 1 month later, I sat in a cold courthouse room with wood paneling that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, raising my right hand to swear I'd tell the truth about everything that had happened. The prosecutor walked me through every single post, every lie, every escalation, while I kept my voice steady, even though Lena was muttering under her breath from the defendant's table, and Diane was shooting daggers at me from the gallery. I testified for 4 hours straight, going through every piece of evidence, every screenshot, every threatening message, painting the picture of how my cousin's sick obsession had nearly destroyed my family. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, my legs were shaking. But I'd done it. I told the truth about everything. And now it was up to the jury to decide what happened next. Jake took the stand next, and I watched him grip the wooden rail as he described finding me curled up on our bathroom floor, sobbing after another fake CPS report. How he'd installed cameras on every door and window. How our happy little family had turned into prisoners in our own home. His voice cracked when he talked about watching me check the locks 5 times every night. About how I'd stopped taking Ethan for walks because I was too scared Lena might grab him. About the security system that cost us $3,000 we didn't really have. The prosecutor asked him to describe the impact on our marriage, and he looked right at me before answering that we'd almost broken under the stress, that I'd blamed myself for not seeing how sick Lena was sooner, that he'd had to take time off work to help me through panic attacks. When Jake stepped down, the detective took his place, laying out the evidence piece by piece, like building blocks of guilt. He showed the jury printouts of the fake Facebook accounts Lena had created to spread lies about me being an unfit mother, text messages between her and Diane planning to call CPS with false reports, recordings from our security cameras showing Lena driving by our house at all hours, even after the restraining order. The worst was the recording he'd gotten from the daycare. Lena on the phone, pretending to be me, trying to add herself to the pickup list, saying she'd lost her ID and could they please, just this once, let her take her son home. The daycare director testified they'd almost fallen for it until they noticed the callback number didn't match mine. Then came Lena's turn to testify, and I had to dig my nails into my palms to keep from screaming as she stood there in a conservative dress I'd never seen her wear, playing victim. She claimed she loved Ethan like her own, and I was cruelly keeping them apart out of jealousy, that she'd only wanted to help raise him, that the Facebook posts were just her way of showing love. Her testimony got more and more unhinged as she went on, claiming I'd always been jealous of her, that I'd stolen Jake from her, they'd never even met before I introduced them, that Ethan would be better off with someone more stable. Her own lawyer kept trying to redirect her, but she just kept rambling about how she deserved to be in Ethan's life, how blood meant she had rights, how I was poisoning everyone against her. The jury took only 3 hours to deliberate. And when they came back, the foreman stood and read guilty on all counts for both defendants. Lena got 18 months probation with mandatory psychiatric treatment and a permanent restraining order that covered not just us, but any future children we might have. Diane got 12 months probation and 200 hours of community service for her part in the conspiracy. Lena's lawyer really let her ramble about deserving rights to someone else's baby in open court. That defense strategy seems questionable when your client is digging their own legal hole deeper with every word about blood rights and stolen boyfriends that never existed. Outside on the courthouse steps, I felt empty instead of victorious, as Mom hugged me and we both cried for what we'd lost. Not just Lena, but the whole idea that family meant something, that blood bonds couldn't be broken. Jake held Ethan, who was 8 months old now and reaching for everything with chubby hands, completely unaware of the drama that had swirled around him since before he could hold his head up. Jake kissed our son's forehead and promised him this was where it ended, that the cycle of manipulation and toxic behavior stopped with our generation, that he'd never have to doubt whether the people who said they loved him actually meant it. Michelle found us there and mentioned the civil suit was still pending, but would likely settle favorably now that we had criminal convictions, that the money might help with therapy costs and the security systems we'd had to install. A week later, I went back to work in person for the first time since everything started. My coworkers, who'd followed the case online, offered support and hugs. Tom, my boss, assured me my position was secure and approved flexible scheduling so I could attend therapy appointments without using vacation time. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma and hypervigilance, who helped me understand that Lena's mental illness wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have prevented this by being a better cousin or setting different boundaries. She taught me breathing exercises for when I'd hear a car slow down outside and panic that it might be Lena. Helped me work through the guilt I felt about destroying my family, even though I knew I'd had no choice. 6 weeks after the trial on Ethan's first birthday, I posted a simple photo of his birthday cake on Facebook. No baby visible, just the chocolate cake with one candle. The comments were purely supportive. No drama, no false claims, no one pretending to be his mother. I closed the app and picked up my son from his high chair where he'd been banging a wooden spoon and carried him out to the backyard where Jake was setting up a small table. Only Jake's parents and mom were there. A tiny celebration compared to the huge party I'd once imagined, but it felt right. Ethan laughed and squealed as Jake helped him smash his own little personal cake. Chocolate frosting going everywhere, his giggles filling the yard. For the first time in months, I felt truly present in the moment. Not looking over my shoulder, not checking locks, not worried about who might be watching. The restraining order paperwork sat in our filing cabinet next to Ethan's birth certificate and immunization records, a reminder of what we'd survived. But today wasn't about that trauma. Today was about our son's joy, his chocolate-covered face, The way he clapped his messy hands when we sang happy birthday, the simple, perfect normalness of a baby turning one surrounded by people who actually loved him. So, that's my story. It's been a wild ride through family court and Facebook drama. If you made it to the end, wow. Thank you for letting me share this intensely personal journey. Have you ever faced something so bizarre and hurtful from someone you thought was family? What would you have done in my place? I really want to know what you think, so drop a comment below.